Hey there, YouTubers. Alright, so in this video we're going to talk about the HP 290 Slim, and I'm going to talk about the upgrades that I did to it to make it a better computer. Now, let's face it, when you bought that computer right out of the box, you probably right away weren't happy with it, right? It's got a pretty weak CPU, doesn't have a lot of RAM, and it's got a mechanical hard drive. So we'll talk about all the things I did to make that a better computer. Finally, though, there's one thing I did not upgrade that I think may or may not be such a great idea, and we'll talk about that at the end. So let's go check out my HP computer. I'm gonna tear it open, and then you can see what I did to it. I'm going to show you some benchmarks that I have from it, and then I'm going to show you a benchmark of something that if you were to add to it, see what it would do for you. And if you happen to want to use this for a gaming computer, I can kind of give you an idea of, let's say, how that might run Fortnite. Alright, so let's check it out. Alright, so we are using the HP 290 hooked up to our home theater system down in the basement. I've dimmed the lights. We're doing a screen record, and I basically wanted to in this portion show you the benchmarks that I had for this computer. Now, we've talked about the improvements I made to it, and here's what it used to be. This is a Cellphone, basically what you would expect probably from your system score wise. Good luck trying to use this for any kind of gaming. Very sluggish for desktop work, and don't even think about trying to do AutoCAD or any kind of 3D CAD. Rendering a video would be rather difficult on this. And you can see there's the G4900 score. It's a very weak processor. The graphics in that are very weak. And then the 500 gigabyte mechanical hard drive, not very impressive. All right, so if we go I had to run the benchmark a couple times to get it right. Here we go. Okay, so here is the i3-9100 version with the solid state drive that I added, and you can see quite a difference. So just on the verge of being decent for gaming, but not quite there. Desktop score, this thing will surf the internet all day, nice and smooth, very strong. And you know what? It's just on the verge of being useful for doing CAD, HitFilm Pro, 3ds animation. You can almost just about use it. Needs a little more horsepower though. All right, so there's some of the other information about it. And you see, if you were to compare the G4900 to the i3-9100, humongous difference in the single core, quad core, and multi-core scores on here. Much more powerful CPU. Graphics score there was almost double. And then you have the solid state drive. While not the fastest solid state drive that I could have put in here, this one is pretty decent for this little computer. If you wanted to go a little faster, Samsung PM981, Samsung EVO 970, Samsung EVO 970 Plus, Samsung 970 Pro. They would all make quite a difference. And then one thing that we did not look at was RAM. So I have 8 gigs in here, which made a difference. I'm going to actually fire this up and double check that you can do 16 gigs. Unfortunately, I don't have a 16 gig stick to try and go beyond 16, but that is what we're going to do. All right, so let's look at the one thing that I did not upgrade that might have been nice to upgrade so you can see. Now you may have noticed that I did a video where I used an external ribbon cable and I hooked up an RX 570 graphics card, and I got pretty good, or maybe it was an RX 460, sorry. I got a decent gaming score out of this computer, and we'll probably pass that score here in a second if I can find it. So you see some other people have done some creative things, hooked up a 570, a 1650, and there's no way to fit these in the case, folks. So you would have to use an external ribbon cable, which is kind of ugly and will put dust in your case. They haven't come out with a better system to run that cable so that you can keep the case closed. So you're just seeing some of the graphics cards that people have used. This is me right here, RX 460. That gaming score will get you able to play Fortnite at medium quality 1080p. So not too bad. May even reach into the high. Depends on what your frames per second is that you would like. Here's some people who use 750 Ti's, which would not, the 750 does not require GPU connectors. So here's the card that you would want to get. This would be a low profile, and this one would actually fit in the case. Not sure there's an exact number there. MSI 2 gig. So when you look at these gaming scores, though, same thing. You'd be lucky if you could run Fortnite 1080p medium settings with this setup. And the one thing this guy could have did that would have improved it, so he had a nice processor. That processor's better than the i3. But where he failed is he did not upgrade his hard drive to a solid state drive. So that would have made quite a bit of difference. These scores would have been more like mine, at least the desktop. His gaming would have probably hit 30. So that is the one thing that I didn't do to this that would have made it more effective. And you can see he used 16 gigs of RAM. So this computer will support 16 gigs of RAM. Now that I see that, there's no point in me trying to go above and beyond. This guy has a 93 for RAM score, and he was able to put 32 gigs in. So that is what I would have expected. He had two 16 gig sticks of RAM, most likely. We can find it. Yeah, two 16 gigs. So I would say don't believe that you can't have more than 16 gigs in this computer, because that's one reason I use these websites, because it tells you stuff that people are able to do and gives you a better idea what they were successful with. So that was me right there. I probably had 12 gigs of RAM in it when I ran this. Yeah, 12 gigs. All right, folks, got the HP 290 Slim ripped open again so we can talk about the essential upgrades to this computer. So you may have seen on my channel the things I have done, and we'll go over these one by one. All right, so first thing, G4900 Celeron is a total dog. Not even worthy of surfing the internet, in my opinion. I have replaced that with an i3 9100. All right, that was a huge improvement. This is like putting almost like putting a i5 7400 in, and definitely at least an i3 8300, somewhere between that and an i5 8400. So a very impressive processor. Now, one thing that I didn't try, that if you wanted a little more horsepower, 9th Gen i5 9400, or maybe even the 9th Gen i7 9700. And of course, you always have the option of an i5 8400, i7 8700, i5 8600, i5 8500. So lots of different options out there to try. They will make a huge difference on this, assuming that you're going to do stuff beyond surfing the internet. So you may have just been happy upgrading that to a G5500, which is a Pentium Gold, which would have made quite a difference, or an i3 8100, which is an 8th Gen i3. That also would be pretty impressive speed-wise. Now, this computer suffers from slow boot ups when it has the good old 500 gigabyte hard drive in there. It's a mechanical one, very slow. So in this computer, I think we actually have a Samsung PM961, which is equivalent to something like this, the Samsung EVO 960. And this is M.2 NVMe. These have incredible read-write times, but there's faster ones out there. So if you want to go, before we get into that, if you want to go with something more affordable and you want to keep your hard drive, but you need to put your operating system on a different computer, this one is pretty cheap, probably less than $30 or around $30. You can get a HP EX900. This one's only 120 gigs, so you'll run out of room fast on this, but as long as you don't store files on it and programs, this thing will be really quick, at least for boot up. Now, if you stick with the really slow mechanical hard drive, you will get slowed down when you're loading programs and other things. So I honestly don't recommend a a solid state drive this small. So other options that would be improvements over that, you've got the Samsung 970 EVO. Now this guy is a lot faster than the ones I've shown you so far, and it has a decent amount of space. This is probably the way to go. This would set you back probably at least $100 though. And there are some 500 gigabyte NVMe's that can be had for $66. And those would not be so bad. Matter of fact, let me show you one. All right, this guy is probably the best deal on the market. This is a Samsung PM981. This is an OEM version of the EVO 970 that we just talked about. This one is actually 512 gigabytes, smoking fast, lots of storage on it. This is what I would tell you is the best deal for the money that you can get, and would really make a difference in here. That'll set you back a minimum of about 66 bucks. If you have an eBay account, Amazon, I'm not sure what it would run you. Figure anywhere from $60 to $90 probably on Amazon. But this is just as good as the EVO 970 for the most part. So huge difference this would make for you. Other options, there's a 500 gigabyte version of this, which comes in at $600. This one is a pretty decent drive. I honestly feel like there's some false advertising in the speeds, like it's supposed to be faster than it actually is. But for the money, a really good deal. If you want to buy, I'd say something brand new, where that PM981, a lot of the times they pull those out of a working HP or Dell computer. So this one, you would buy brand new off the Amazon. And even 256 gigs, this is pretty decent. But if you're going to replace the hard drive in general, you need at least the 500 gig version, most likely these days. Other options, here's this is also pretty quick, HP EX920. I believe this is in the $40 range, and this is a pretty decent speed. You can jump up the EX950, which starts to compete with your Samsung EVOs. And that'll set you back, I believe, at least $60–70 to get the 950. So that about wraps up the solid state drive upgrades that you can do, or that I would recommend. And these are all, products that I have and I use. And if I were to rank them, the one that I didn't talk about, this is my fastest drive, and there's even faster out there. There's the EVO 970 Pro. This would probably, if I was just trying to get the fastest machine and not worry so much about storage space, this would give me the best performance that I have. All right, so the other thing you must do for all right, had to take a little breather there. So the other thing that you really need to do for this computer is upgrade the RAM. 4 gigabytes of RAM is just not going to work for this computer. It's really hard to even surf the internet with that. If you left one window open or one tab inside of Windows, you might be okay. But if you're like most people, you have multiple tabs open, you may have Microsoft Excel open, you might have Microsoft Word. The more programs you start to open up, the worse your computer is going to perform. Okay, so 8 gig minimum. So expect to at least put another 4 gigs in here. Now, ideally, these days, in my opinion, 12 gigs is the way to go. Okay, and I saw online today that you can put in up to 32 gigs here. So a 16 gig stick and a 16 gig stick. That'll set you back some change. Most of you will not need that kind of RAM. That's for your super users, your CAD users, other folks like that. So that about sums this up. Now, the one thing that I did not talk about is a graphics card, which I will show you some benchmarks of what if you were to have a graphics card, what it would do. Just know that because of this very weak power supply that's in here, you would need a slimline, and it would be a GT 1030. And there isn't a whole lot of room in here, but unlike the Dell Vostro 3470 that I used, you actually have a little bit of width here. So let me just demonstrate something here. All right, so kind of hard to see, but I have a GTX 750 here, and a couple of issues in here, obviously. One, I don't have this set up just yet. So I don't have that perfectly lined up. This would need to move that direction another ½ inch. And this card's not going to work in here at all. Now, even if you left the case open, this would be in the way. So you need something that's not only, we'll say, low profile. It needs to basically not be any taller than slightly less than the height of this guy down to that card. So they have the GT 1030 out there, and hopefully from the user benchmark you can see which part number it is. I believe it's MSI 2 gig. That will make slight difference in this computer. If you had a really awesome CPU in here, that graphics card is, just going to make a little bit of difference. I'm not sure, how much it's going to help out a Celeron, which would be a dog. Trying to play a game with a dog is not going to work so great. So if you have other options would be, all right, the final thing we're going to talk about is GPU upgrades. Now, there aren't a whole lot of options out there because most of the graphics cards are pretty weak that would fit inside of this box, which is really kind of is depressing, to be honest with you. Not only do you have a weak power supply that doesn't allow you to hook much up, the fact that it's got to be, the card can't be any taller then basically from about here down to the PCI Express slot there. Now, what does that tell you? Basically, as far as I know, there's only one graphics card out there that will fit in there. It's a GT 1030, low profile. There's different versions of it. I believe when we look at the benchmark later, we'll see an example of an MSI 2 GB version. Now, what's that going to do for your performance? Well, that's going to take you from, let's say, maybe being able to play Fortnite at 1080p low, maybe 720p, somewhere in 720p land, to 1080p medium settings. So this is a decent increase. If you just had to be able to play Fortnite at a decent setting, then you probably need that graphics card. It's not going to do all that much for you, but it's better than nothing. Other options, if you want to leave your case open, we got this thing called a PCI ribbon extender, and I have used this on the show, on the channel. I don't know if we call this a show, but use this on a channel quite a bit. Snaps in like that, and you probably want to buy a longer one than what I got here, because this has to rest on something. And it probably actually would almost work like that, right? That's not super, really a good spot for it. Once you put the other part of the frame back in, though, it may, sit on there. But what does this do? This leaves your computer open for dust and all kinds of other crap to happen to it, which isn't, so great. Plus, it turns into an eyesore. But now, when we check out the benchmark, user benchmark, this is really what people did to make this work, okay? It's the only way you're going to get some of these graphics cards in here. Now, there are people that had power supplies that will not run off of this. They also would have disconnected that and used an external power supply. So there's a couple of things that you would have to do to get this thing actually working. And I'm not even sure what connectors are out there for this. I know for the Dells, you can go for 24 pin to an 8 pin, and I've got a connector for that. But this guy is, there's your 12 volts for your CPU there. And the other side, it's another 4 pin. I'm not really sure what connector there is that goes from 24 to 4. I'm sure there's one out there, but all right, so that about sums it up, folks. If you have to do some gaming, connecting your GPU via a PCI ribbon extender is probably going to allow you to plug in a GTX 1050, GTX 1050 Ti, and I'm not sure if the 1650 requires external power. If it doesn't, you may be able to get away with it. There's OEM versions of the RX 460, the RX 560B. I don't know if there's a 560 OEM version. All those are low power and can be hooked up just like this. And then nothing you can really do, with that power supply as far as I know. So the only good thing about that power supply, it's 80%. So it is gold. So it's more likely to obviously be more efficient. All right, so that is all I have for this video, folks.